isn't it possible?
It's just not.
Why not, you stupid bastard?
Up in the sky, look!
It's a bird!
It's a plane! It's Superman!
What? Again?
Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. Now today I'm going to be talking about how I would make a Superman game. This isn't really an original concept. A lot of people have talked about this in the past, but I wanted to throw my hat in the ring and talk about how I would make a Superman game because I'm a big comics fan. I really love Superman and I find him very fascinating. But I know that WB does not want to do a Superman game, it feels like, because of his power set and a lot of other things. So as a comic fan, I feel like I want to do something with this. And I guess you could say, like Homer Simpson says, I'm a giant nerd! I'm proud of it. Like many of you, I'm a nerd. I'm a comics fan. I love the idea of heroes. And for me, I find Superman the most fascinating, but also the most difficult to do video games for. But not impossible. I find it to be the most intriguing and challenging, but also the most fun to come up with a Superman game that balances everything that's been done before, but still does something a little new. Pulling from the comics, pulling from everything. Kind of like the new Wonder Woman game is doing, and also the original Arkham games. If I'm being honest, of course, Superman is a very complicated character to do video games for. He's had very many games, but none of them are good. Like many DC characters, besides Batman, who's had various games, a lot of them bangers and a lot of them not so good, Superman has had the short end of the stick, not just in the movie department, but also in the video game department, with various failed titles and a lot of other things. So, in my eyes, I feel like he would be the perfect character to get an Arkham-like video game that really makes him a well-known character and proves that you can do a Superman game. Just like how Insomniac took all the greatest aspects from the different Spider-Man games of the past and made something of their own. It doesn't do something completely new besides there are different looks for villains, but it does have its own universe feel, just like with the Arkham games, and that's what I plan to do with a Superman game, starting with the story. Now, I actually really like the character of Superman. I know that a lot of people find him very boring, and that is to be understandable, but I do think there's a lot more layers to his character, and I feel like this type of game could really explore that, in the same way that Guardians of the Galaxy did by Square Enix. Not pulling an MCU, but taking a lot more cues from the comics with a story that's interpersonal, where you can have a bit of that saving the world style story that has its own twists and turns. Now, as for my ideas for a Superman game story, I actually want to take notes from Arkham Asylum and also Superman and Lois Season 1. A little bit of influence from Marvel's Spider-Man by Insomniac. Now, with my Superman game story, I actually want to take notes from Superman Rebirth and also a few other storylines from the comics with a little bit of Arkham Origins flair thrown in there. Now, with this story, I do want it to be one of those stories that actually challenges the character of Superman while also complements the character of Superman. Kind of like Marvel's Spider-Man did and also Batman from the Arkham games did. With this story, I want it to be a reflection of all the things that we love about Superman, also sprinkling in some relatable different elements to the character of Superman that are a bit new that we haven't really seen before, and also challenge the character and his morals the same way that the Arkham games did with the character of Batman. And I feel that the villain of the game should really reflect that choice of whether you choose love, hate, your own selfish desires, or the family that you're trying to protect. And that's where there's a bit of complication because the Arkham games had the Joker, and Superman doesn't have those types of villains all the time besides Lex Luthor, Zod, and maybe a few. And unlike Batman, Superman doesn't have too many villains that can really propose a end-of-the-world scenario while also simultaneously challenging his morals besides Lex Luthor and maybe Zod. But we've seen them both before in the movies, and we've seen them in a few games, so I don't want to throw in stuff that we've already seen before
And I did want to have Brainiac and the Eradicator be the villains of this game, but I honestly had trouble really thinking up what would be the, story that could work for that. And I honestly thought Brainiac would work as a villain for this game, as a build-up threat, very similar to how Marvel Spider-Man built up Doc Ock while focusing on Mr. Negative on the side. I think for my version of Brainiac, I would kind of amplify those old elements that we like about him. While he's still a villain, he's also trying to preserve worlds. He's trying to preserve civilizations before they're eradicated. Pun intended. I do feel giving Superman a choice when it comes to Brainiac is that I can bring back the world you lost. My purpose is to bring back and save civilizations before they are destroyed. My own world was destroyed, and I will never let that happen again. But he's also very dangerous. He's very manipulative. I think that this type of Brainiac could be something very interesting to see. Brainiac is very smart, and he has a lot of intelligence, so I feel that giving him that manipulative, I can bring your world back, but it comes at a cost. While also giving a secondary antagonist that reflects that, maybe the Eradicator, who has the souls of the Kryptonians inside him, and also a different, maybe a changed up version of it, very similar to Superman and Lois, that also reflects that choice as well of bringing back the world you lost. Of course, this version of Superman has a family, and I don't think he would ever choose his old life over his new one. And that's really the heft as a character. But enough about story.
Let's actually talk about gameplay, because obviously that's the best part of any game ever. Now, obviously, I do want to talk about the map first and exploration, and then we'll get into combat and other things a little bit later. Now, with the map, obviously we're going to be setting this in Metropolis, because that's Superman's home turf, and like the Arkham games, we got different versions of Gotham and the different segments of it. So for this, I am going to be pulling a little bit from Suicide Squad, but also pulling a lot more from Superman the Animated Series, because Metropolis is very different to Gotham, where it's more bright and it's almost like a thriving utopia compared to the more grittier, darker Gotham City. So I wanted to actually reflect that, being this giant, grandiose, complex to get around, and I want it to be a very urban jungle in some aspects. With Metropolis, I do want to pull a little bit from Arkham Origins, being able to fly all the way to Smallville, or the ability to fly all the way to the Fortress of Solitude, or it could be kind of like a teleport fly similar to the Batwing, where basically it is like our Batcave-like hub where we can train, look at collectibles, and other different things. With the Fortress of Solitude to have that Batcave-like feel, but also being able to see other Easter eggs, interact with different things, train, and also getting to interact with the different holograms and other tech that Superman has. Being able to interact with it, like the Phantom Zone projector or any other things. It would actually be pretty interesting to even learn about the different villains through crystals, or even being able to interact with the different AI, like Jor-El or his mother, or maybe even getting to see other AIs of different Kryptonians that were friends of the family, like Kara's parents and stuff like that. I do actually want to make it a lot more like Arkham Origins Batcave, because you can actually interact and have different conversations as the story goes on and stuff like that. Now, when it comes to flying around Metropolis and the traversal system, this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because I want Superman's traversal to be a little different, and I'm going to be pulling a little bit from Undefeated and also from Factor 5. Now, you can fly, but I want to make sure that the flying controls aren't clunky, and I do want to pull a little bit from the Arkham games and also from Insomniac's Spider-Man. Now, I did think about giving Superman a bit of a trick system while he's flying, but I didn't think it would work because you can't really be stylish. Yeah, you can go in the loop-de-loops and stuff like that, but really, I don't see Superman really doing that. He's flying from point A to point B, and you can upgrade your flight to go very fast. And when it comes down to flying in Metropolis, it's like an urban jungle, so you have to be very careful. But your other traversal option, that is your super speed. Now, it's not going to be Flash level fast, but it can get you to point A to point B, mainly like the neon power from Infamous Second Son, where it can be used to get to point A to point B. And maybe you can have little speed buffs or stuff like that. Maybe you can upgrade it. I don't really know. At least for traversal, because Superman's traversal is not really as expansive as his combat, which I'm going to get into right now. For Superman's combat, I actually want to take a lot of liberties from Undefeated, Arkham, Marvel Spider-Man, and Factor 5's Unmade Superman game. Mainly Factor 5, but I also wanted to pull some interesting ideas and concepts from the comics and Superman and Lois. Now, for this version of Superman being in its own universe, we can have some fun and experiment when it comes down to combat. When it comes to my ideas for combat, I'm going to be pulling from Undefeated, Factor 5, and Arkham. Especially Arkham, because I want there to be a bit of strategy when it comes to combat, but also still have Superman be overpowered, but not too overpowered where every enemy feels like a pushover and you can just speed hit them until they die, like in Undefeated. I feel that takes away from the challenge of combat and just makes Superman feel too overpowered, and I don't want that. When it comes to Superman's combat in general, it is a bit more strategy based, where it does pull a lot from Arkham Knight, Arkham City, and stuff like that, where you can use your mid-strength to fly and push an enemy, or maybe knock out a fire hydrant and you can use your freeze breath to freeze it and maybe freeze an enemy in place if they're standing in the water, or use different things in the environment to take on different enemies. And I want to make sure that there is different variations of enemies where even the normal enemies can give you a challenge because of the different variations of enemies and stuff like that, which I will get into a little bit later. Now with Superman's abilities and if actual combat, you can fly punch enemies, punch the ground, use the environment to your advantage. It is a combo-based system, but it is a little bit Arkham-esque, but a little dialed back. I will say that enemies would have certain weapons, or different enemies that are more superpowered based would give you a lot more of a challenge. Now, if regular enemies just shoot at you with regular bullets, nothing would happen because Superman is bulletproof. But if they do shoot at you with kryptonite-based bullets, it does have a bit of an effect of like a poison effect that can slowly weaken you, or just a regular blast of kryptonite-based energy that can take chunks out of your health, or regular bullets that are mixed with kryptonite that can have that effect similar to Arkham. But kryptonite wouldn't be the only thing that you have to worry about, because Superman has a lot of enemies and a lot of different weaknesses that aren't just kryptonite, like red sun radiation and immense sound that puts pressure on his superpower of super hearing that can stun him, or a little bit of electricity. It's not much of a weakness, but it is a slight kind of stun lock him or knock him down a little bit in some aspects, because we've seen it before with his fights with Livewire. Now, Superman's greatest enemies are the ones that are equal to him, and that's what makes a Superman game worth playing. So I kind of want to have that in some aspects. So some of the enemies do capitalize on some of Superman's weaknesses, and you also have the superpowered enemies that really push it even further because of the fact that they are equal to Superman. Different enemies you would have to deal with are Intergang, regular-based enemies, and also eradicated humans, maybe some Kryptonians or Lex bots or stuff like that. I don't want to underpower Superman. I do want to take a Factor 5 approach, but I also want to pull from Arkham in some aspects where the enemies are just as equal to you, and there is a lot more strategy that capitalizes on your weaknesses and also adds a lot more strategy to the way you fight and the combat, which I'm going to get into a little bit more now. There is a sun-based bar, your solar bar, because that's not something that I came up with. It's an obvious mechanic that a lot of people have thought of that you have to keep track of. Now, kryptonite or red solar radiation does have an effect of slowing that bar, and basically the more you use up that bar and that energy, the less you can use your actual powers like your heat vision, cold breath, super hearing, and also x-ray vision. Once you use up that bar, you're pretty weak and you can no longer access your other abilities, and you're very dampened on what you can do. So it kind of adds a bit of risk and reward, adds a little bit more strategy to combat, kind of like an Infamous in some aspects. So you can always refuel that solar bar, but once it's affected or dampened or basically messed with, it does have an effect on your powers. Obviously, Superman has his cold breath that can be used offensively and defensively, being able to upgrade it and stuff like that. Just like with your flight or your traversal, you can upgrade all your abilities and use them in different various ways. Your heat vision actually can be charged, and the more you use it, it can actually be increased into like a massive blast of energy that you can increase and stuff like that. Hell, you do have another bar, which is your solar flare bar, that you can channel into two different facets. Your heat vision or another, take what I said back, actually 3 different ways. A small giant dispersal of energy, or the actual way Superman's solar flare works is that all his abilities get amplified all at once, so it's like a last-ditch effort. But it does leave you incredibly vulnerable once you use it up. So it's a very risky ability to use, and it's a last-ditch effort. So the solar flare is kind of like your final stand type of ability. If there's more enemies on the field, then you're screwed because you're very weak from using it. So it adds that risk reward in some aspects. And obviously, Superman does have aerial combat, which you can push enemies through buildings or push them into the ground or different other things.
Gameplay is very versatile, and it has a lot of different layers to it and has a lot of different things that you can do. But, you know, this is just all my ideas. Let me know a lot of your ideas in the comments down below. How would you do a Superman game? Do you have any ideas for a story? What would you do? Let me know. I really love to hear it. And also, I'm very sorry that there hasn't been a lot of videos lately. These do take a long time to record, edit, get together. So your support does mean a lot. Make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And also let me know, what is your favorite DC character? I love to hear that in the comments down below. Also, check out my Discord, because I will be keeping different updates on videos, my progress on things, and also keep an eye out for any other videos on the channel. I do have some interesting ones coming up very soon, and also have a happy Halloween season, and peace out. Bye-bye.